Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unity Through Diversity, and I'm your host, Gina Anayana. This is the opening episode for my podcast, Unity Through Diversity, and I just feel called to do a opening episode just by myself to brief you where this idea come from, and why it take almost 2 years to birth this podcast, and also some ground rules, some uniqueness about this podcast, because the name of this podcast is called Unity Through Diversity. So there are some things about this podcast is very unique compared to other podcasts. There's no good or bad. It's just somehow the essence of this podcast. And she wants me to just spread this message in this first episode to kind of like announce her birth, I guess. So, we can start. The idea started in 2020, right end of the May. That time, what was going on was George Floyd, right? And I believe that some of you might know better about why it happened and what happened. Now the point is, the fact is things happen for a reason, right? Everything's happened for a reason. And in this podcast, I just want to briefly to express, to tell a story, what it brought up inside of my own system from George Floyd. So when that thing happened, so many things going on the news, and I suddenly had this realization, or I started to ask myself, because that time George Floyd event happened. It brought up a lot of separation, the white and the black. And when I look at myself, and I was like, I'm not white, I'm not black, I'm Asian. And even the craziest part is I have to mix the baby. So which category you want to put them in? They do not fit any category because they are very unique, right? They are mixed baby of Asian and American. So that time I started to ask myself, what can I do? What can I do? What can I help when everybody now at the situations that time was, to me, it's a separation, right? And I started questioning myself as an Asian, as a minority in United States. If the white and black started fighting, and where I can stand. What is the people from my nationality or people from eastern part of the world, where they stand in this world? And what can I do to actually create this unity environment for my girls, because they are even special, you cannot put them in any category. So that's I think the seed planted was in 2020 when the whole event started, and you start to see the separation. And I asked myself, how can I bring unity to this, to destroy this separation, to unify the gap between this separation. So that's the seed that started. And I was like, I also ask myself, because anytime I create things right now, is I want to see whether my personal hobbies or personal likes could align with what I want to create. You see, when we start certain things, I don't want to treat it as a job, right? You go to 9 to 5. I haven't been working in this lifestyle 9 to 5 for last probably 10 years, even more, 12 years. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to work the way I chose to, not necessarily to against anybody. It's just what I choose to in a more free flow. So I was, that's a great idea. I want to do something, and I want to create something that can align my personal interests. So from the seed, it moved to an idea to start a podcast, right? I was like, podcast sounds great. 2020, I mean, the podcast started growing, and I had no previous experience in podcast industry, and I had no idea how to pull things together. However, I'm type of person that if I really love something, I can convince myself and somehow figure things out. So that's just me. And that time I was like, how can I start this podcast and I love this podcast and also blend my personal interests in this podcast so I can do not treat it as a job, but more like a passion. So I had an idea. I was like, I want to go travel. I want to have a camper. I want to go travel, and I can meet people and interview their personal story. That time, it's very simple because I know my intentions that time is through those personal story to share their gift and share their light to bring the message of celebrate this diversity, right? Brings the diversity, each different ray of the rainbow. You think about each color, they represent something. And then when you put those together, they are a whole. They are the unity. So the intention is very simple. Through the personal story and celebrate, acknowledge their gifts, and also can encourage and empower other people to share their story. So brings this unity consciousness to the world. Very simple. So that time it was June, and I was like, I want to get a camper. I want to go travel. I want to meet interesting people and do the podcast, about interview their story. That sounds very fun. Because first of all, I love to travel. Second of all, I always want to have a camper. So I could go freely. I go travel, do things I like, and meet new people. I like to communicate and talk to people. And also, meanwhile, do a podcast. Why not, right? So I can align my personal interests with the podcast, the initial, intention of the podcast. Perfect idea. Then the name, right? Where's the name come from? The name called Unity Through Diversity. I did not, I had a hard time to come to have a name because at that time I just want to know a unity, consciousness, and through people's story. I remember I was having a Akashic reading with Candace. She's an awesome lady, by the way. That I had a Akashic reading early June. Then one day I pulled out this recording and listened to this Akashic record reading with her. And I kind of meditated a little bit, and the message was listen to this recording. So I literally pulled out the recording. I was listening to it. And not to be kidding, I think Candace mentioned in the transmission, she mentioned something about unity through diversity. And I was like, that's it. That's the name of the podcast, called Unity Through Diversity. So I'm very excited at that time, right? I found a name. I aligned my own interests with the passion of creating this podcast. Now, however, when we birthing something, that from the seed to actually birthing something, it's just like when you're pregnant, right? You want to get pregnant and you're ready to get pregnant and you're actually pregnant. But the pregnancy itself take 8 to 9 months, depends on, each woman's body. And how I birthed this podcast is literally like a long pregnancy. Human pregnancy is like 8-9 months. My pregnancy with this podcast is like 18 months. 18 to 20 months. But it needed. She chose to go through and also work with me. A little bit about my personal life. That time in June, I had this idea. I got the name, and actually I got my camper for my birthday gift. So thanks to my girl's father that he really supported me. However, that time myself is in the middle of transform my relationship with my girl's father. So the podcast idea is generated in June, and end of July, we decided to decoupling our relationship, to transform our relationship into a different form, I would say. So the process started at the end of July, and our case did not close until end of March in 2021. So that was 7-8 months in, and during that transition, I feel like it's just like you want to have a baby, but your body is not, it's not capable to kind of like, how to say that? Your body is not ready to carry this baby through the pregnancy. And the same thing. So I had this idea, I want to birth this podcast, but that time, my physical life, I do not have space. I do not have time and energy and space to birth this podcast. So end of March, finally, our case is closed and everything seems like closed a chapter. But however, you got to know that when you just out of a relationship, it's a process of rebuilding, regrounding yourself, and reroot yourself. I don't know even where there is a word called reroot. However, end of March, close the case. Then I started to looking for a new home for myself because I decided to, girl's father gonna keep the house, and I decided to move out. So it's a very unstable that time because I know that, thankfully that we closed the case with love and compassion. That's another episode I want to really talk about how to consciously transform your relationship, but that will be in another episode. So end of March, when things closed, however, I was not still in a good state to birth this podcast because I needed my own space. That time I don't even know where is my new home, my home. I got this house in May 14th. I got the key and I moved in on my birthday, June 22nd. So when I moved in, or when I got the key to when I moved in, that's a lot of putting a lot of work to build, to create this sanctuary, which is my healing practice where it's located right now. So June, after I moved in, things kind of like getting stable a little bit. And I used July, August, and September to really kind of like connect with people in the community to get myself grounded, to spread the word about my healing practice called inner sensory healing, and I do a lot of energy work. So finally, around September, I feel like I'm ready, right? I went through from last year, 2020, June to the September 2021. It's like 15 months in. And finally, I feel like I'm ready to birth this podcast. So I started calling the energy of having people to come into my life to help me to co-create this podcast. That time in my life, I understand that even though I have this determination, I have this capability to do everything by myself. However, I choose to do what I'm good at. I'm good at have connection. I'm good at finding the people, do the like interview part. I like to talk to people. I like to ask questions. I like to find this love and light inside them. However, I do not like to do editing. That's another part I'm gonna bring in later about the uniqueness about this podcast. So I was calling in the energy for people to work with me. So I'm currently working with Bourbon Production through a friend that he introduced me to this production company that I met them in September. And we signed this contract to work together beginning of October. So I I signed my contract, and I already recorded 3 episodes in 2020. So I hand over the episodes for them to kind of help me to edit. And yes, then I was like, I'm ready. Everything is in the process. And however, I think this lady, I call her lady, or she has this podcast, Unity Through Diversity. She has her own personality, and she chose, just like the baby when we're pregnant with baby, right? You think you want them to come in certain time, but no, they will either be a couple weeks early or a couple weeks late, depends on when they're ready or not. And the same thing with this podcast. She chose the time to come to announce her own arrival in her own way and her own timing. So in October, when everything's in the editing process, and I was so excited, I think, wow, yes, I can burst this podcast by before end of 2021. However, the COVID hit, the gentleman who's helped me editing my podcast got COVID in November. So we pushed our meeting to December. And then December is Christmas and everything holiday. So it's just so busy. It's not a great time. And then finally we moved to January. And of course, some COVID situation happened again. So finally, last week, January, I think it's around 20th, I finally met Jacob again, who's helped me to edit the podcast. So he handed over those finished editing the 4 episodes, and gave it to me. And now I'm doing this opening podcast right here. So I know she is coming, and we agreed on the time that we're going to release. We're going to prime this first couple episodes on February the 1st. So you're going to hear this podcast on February 1st. However, this lady, Unity Through Diversity, I want to officially introduce you to her because she has some announcement. Even though I'm the person bring her to the world, however, she make her own rules, and she chose me to be the host of this podcast. Is because that some of the energy I carry is the energy that align with her, that she knows that if I focus on concentrating on those type of energy, it will align her mission. So she has her own mission. She has her own conscious. Now, the quality of her, and if you ask me use certain words to describe her, she is very driven. She is determined. She is fierce. She doesn't have much of this limitation. She is free. She creates her own rules, and she doesn't play a lot of rules that's already created in the podcast industry. So I really, every time I bring her out or she work through me, is this type of energy, is very precisely, and she knows exactly where she wants to go, and she will fully put her energy in, doesn't really worry about how people sees her, which is very badass, very fearless, this type of energy. So there are certain rules that she wanted me to write it down, and she wanted me to bring this message through this opening episode. So I just want to honor her, and I love her so much that like she is my creation, but it's not. I don't own her. Yeah, she has her own consciousness that I mentioned a couple times. So first of the thing is, all is welcome. Everybody is welcome on this podcast. And the main thing is what we try to bring forward is this unique stories, this unique frequency. So everybody has its unique soul signature that very, very different from any other souls. So the main purpose of this podcast is bring forth this unique soul signature, this frequency through everybody's personal story, right? Story is very powerful. And your story is gonna allow other people, give other people the permission to share other people's story, to empower other people, to bring out that your unique gift, unique frequency, right? So everybody is welcome. However, she wants to stress this part is there's no, a lot of podcasts. I'm not trying to say which is good or which is bad. However, what she tried to say is, if you are a CEO of a company, beautiful, 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 because you have a bigger platform to share your medicine, share your this essence to serve the collective. Now, however, in this podcast, we also gonna bring in whoever is their light is so bright, or they are willing to share their light, share their story through this platform, Unity Through Diversity. So you might gonna see some famous people in certain industries. Some are the CEOs, some are the director, and some are maybe just a mom. Some maybe even be homeless person. Some maybe the trolley driver. I actually met a beautiful, beautiful soul in Sedona in 2020, and he is a trolley driver. I want to bring him on, to this podcast. And some might be 90 years old grandpa. Matter of fact, I'm gonna just give you a little more information. Is one of the episode is one of my friends' grandpa, and he's 90 years old. There's no hierarchy. There's no superior. So whoever come to this podcast, we want you to know that we're gonna bring in whoever is their energy is aligned with this podcast. Not limited to any titles, social status, and how many material things you own. Open for all if you align with that. And the second of all is every single episode, every single guest that we bring onto this podcast, we're not going to provide any questions to you because people sometimes get nervous of what kind of question you're going to ask, whether they're kind of comfortable with these questions. First of all, I do not know what kind of questions she wants me to ask, because everybody is different. Everybody's story is different, and how they tell their story is also different. How can I use a unified, not unified? How can I use this like a standard question to ask to bring each unique story to the life? Every single person deserves their own unique questions. I'm not saying I'm not going to ask the same questions, but I'm saying I do not have a question list that I want to ask, because depends on how we communicate and how she going to come through me, that we're going to ask these very unique questions. I think people like to have those questions listed is because sometimes they do not know that what kind of questions you're going to ask them, and a lot of us still in the process of kind of like we have some parts we are comfortable and we have some part we are not comfortable, and we usually want to share the part that we feel comfortable, and we do not want to talk about things that we don't feel uncomfortable, which I understand, totally understand. However, in this podcast, we just want to address this part is that wherever the conversation goes, there might be some questions that you do not feel comfortable. But also, our intention is not to make you feel uncomfortable. But however, there's a lot of growth in those uncomfortable area. Maybe through our conversation, gonna bring up certain things that's not in your awareness, but it needed to be bring to your awareness, right? So we want to invite you to have this open-minded mindset, then kind of welcome those uncomfortable questions if you open. If you think that come to our podcast is going to trigger something uncomfortable inside of you and you're not ready for that, we respect that. We totally respect that. So because the reason we bring this up is because through the last 2 years, when every time I share this intention about the podcast, and I know people willing to, which is we are honored to have you on our podcast. However, I want you to just kind of go through, see where you're at in your life, and if you're not comfortable to talk about this uncomfortable things, we understand, we respect that. When time is ready, we are open for you, right? So this is the second part. And the third part is we try to bring this idea, this really the energy of this authentic, the raw, the real part of myself, and also the real authentic, the part of this podcast, which is the energy she tried to bring through. What that means is in this podcast, you might not gonna hear fancy this background music, right? Fancy intro, fancy outro. This very neat. Every single episode is well edited. I'm not saying that we are not going to edit the podcast. Of course, we're going to do our best to edit podcasts. However, because that sometime I do not know where I'm going to record the episode with who, because it's really when we work in the flow, is I might gonna find somebody at this farmer's market, and we might just sit down at the corner of a certain area, just say, hey, are you willing to come to the podcast? Because I feel like there are certain stories, certain things in your life that it has this medicine, and I want to just bring this medicine forward, and then I want you to share this gift and share this medicine with the world. So if people say yes, we might gonna record this podcast just somewhere like public. We might have background noise that we probably cannot really take away. So those are just these scenarios we just want to bring into. So you are not gonna have a very refined this podcast that it has intro, outro music, background music. We might have a long pause because we are just not randomly. We just allow the energy to come through, which is certain episodes are gonna record it. It's not very well prepared, I would say. Like we are prepared ready to bring the energy through. However, the physical surroundings setting might not be the perfect studio setting. That's what we were talking about. So allow this authentic, raw, the real, essence come through this podcast. And another part that we're gonna bring up is the message we share in this podcast. We are open for everybody, right? Everybody is welcome to listen, to check out what we are talking about here. However, I want to say, we also want to remind you that maybe the message is not resonate with you where you're at. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. It's just each podcast, each creation they have their own essence, which means their own energy, own frequency, and not everybody is on the same frequency. Because again, back to unity through diversity, right? The unity consciousness is allow the different things, different essence, different energy, different frequency to coexist. That's the beauty of the unity. Unity is accept all and not judging which is good, who is good, who is bad, who is high, who is low. We are welcome all. So this podcast itself, we want to have this idea, this message to share with you is open for everybody. And however, you might not gonna resonate with certain episodes, of course, and that's something we just want to bring to you. And also, we want to kind of invite you to when you feel ready, when you feel resonated with this essence, the energy of the podcast, we want to invite you to come onto this podcast, share your unique story, share your unique frequency and medicine. We open for all of you. So if you feel called to, if you feel certain words that we just shared it somehow touch your heart, you feel this, it align with you, align with how you want to share your medicine, share your message, share your light, feel free to reach out. And also, we want to encourage you to share this podcast if you feel resonate, because if the story that you got touched, and which means that there are other people out there, they might need this medicine, and they might need your medicine, and I'm for sure they need your medicine. Everybody's story is very powerful. So if you like this podcast, like the episode, I want you to share with the people that you think they would be also like this podcast, this episode. At the end of the podcast, she wanted me to share with you our intention, our mission, what we really going to talk about in this podcast. And this will be our opening, the intro part of next episodes. The intro part will be this part of the message. And thank you for tuning in. So at the end, I want to share with you our mission, right? Unity Through Diversity is a podcast where we acknowledge and celebrate individuals' unique soul gift through each guest's personal story. And in order to empower and encourage you to recognize and reclaim the uniqueness in your own soul frequencies. So we, as a collective, can truly embrace unity through diversity in our life. So this is our I would call the mission statement, and what we really try to bring forth is through everybody, whoever's come to the podcast, their unique personal story to celebrate, to recognize their unique soul frequency, and also give you permission to share your soul medicine, to empower you, and you're going to empower other people. So we are going to create this ripple effect. So thank you for your time and for your energy, and tuning in this episode, opening episode of Unity Through Diversity. And we will see you soon. And first couple episodes, like I said, we will release on February 1st. It's actually Chinese New Year, a new beginning, a new start. And we want to invite you all to, whoever is ready, if you resonate, and come to share your story. So until next time, thank you so much, and I will see you guys soon. Thank you.